Hello, my name is Phil and welcome back to the new Antioch Report. In today's video I'm tackling the last addition to my new Antioch warband for now, and that is the Mechanised Infantry. The Mechanised Infantry are one of the coolest sculpts in Trench Crusade, and I just love how the Lewis gun looks in this World War I walking tank style, so let's get into it. As per the norm on this channel, I start off with an army painter matte black prime all over. But instead of doing a zenithal like I usually do, these guys are getting something a bit different. I wanted to try out a new effect, which meant first of all they needed a base coat of silver. For this I used two thin coats Surcoat silver through my airbrush. I thin it approximately 2:1 silver to Vallejo airbrush thinner at 25 psi. I say approximately as I've got a pretty good feeling where I need to fill up the thinner and how much paint to add. This is something that will be different with your setup than it is to mine and comes with practice, so rather than give you exact measurements, I would advise that if you know your setup well, then do what suits you best, and if you don't, or if you're new to airbrushing, just experiment on some old models or even sprue to find out what works best for you. Before moving on to anything else, I want to protect some of the areas of silver from being painted over. Partly because they're going to be metal and a smooth airbrush layer is never a bad thing, but mainly because I was going to go over the entire model with colour, I didn't want to build up unnecessary layers of paint. To do this, I used Vallejo liquid mask to cover up the areas of the gun and some areas of chainmail and the engines. With the silver down and the masking done, it was on to why I wanted to do this. I used AK Interactive Worn Effects acrylic fluid neat through the airbrush, again 25 psi. The reason for the silver is that this is a chipping fluid. Once the top coat is on, use water and a brush or a toothpick or something to essentially chip it off and show the undercoat. Since these are walking suits of armour, I wanted the base coat of silver to be what came through rather than the black primer. After allowing the fluid to dry, it was on to the top coat. I mainly used the same recipe for the green as I do on the rest of the New Antioch, but without the Vallejo Model Air olive green, opting to go straight for the Vallejo Model Air US olive drab. This again was thinned approximately 2:1 paint to thin in the airbrush at 25 psi. There was a lot of flat area, and with the weathering I was planning on doing, there wasn't really a need to do the olive green step. Again, deviating from what I've done before, I skipped over the US Olive Drab and Vallejo Model Colour Japanese Uniform highlight mix and went straight for the US Olive Drab and Vallejo Model Colour Dark Sand highlight step for a brighter contrast, which would again come through the weathering later better. This I mixed 50-50 with the total being mixed 50-50 with thinner to go through the airbrush again at 25 psi. With the airbrushing done, the top coat dry and masking removed, it was time to move on to the chipping. Now, I will admit this didn't go as well as I would have hoped. I think I left the top coat too long before I started, but this was my first time using the chipping fluid, so it was a learning curve, and that's part of the fun of painting for me. With all these videos of the New Antioch and a lot of the weathering is the first time either experimenting with it or me doing it, me just bringing along for the journey. Back to the chipping, I use water and the tip of a brush to start the chipping, and then use a toothpick, needle, or what I found best, the wooden end of my brush, or side of it to chip through the top coat to the silver underneath. Rather than just brute forcing my way through the paint, the chipping fluid did do its job once the water penetrated, so it did work, but I need to leave less time in between next time. On to the detail work, and I started off using Citadel Contrast Black Legion to pick out the machine gun casing. I used this in the last video and I found it broke up the blocky silver nicely in a utilitarian non-flashy way. Once dried, I then gave them a dry brush / a stipple of Vallejo Model Colour medium grey just to give them a subtle highlight and not leave them looking too flat. Although I had masked up the larger areas of silver with the masking fluid, there were still some details that needed to be picked out. So I went back with the two thin coats Surcoat silver and went over the remaining gun details, drum magazines, handles, small details, and for some unknown reason all the rivets. I did the larger ones in the lower left legs and thought, I would continue on all the small rivets. There were a lot of them and not easily seen, so for my own detriment I know they are there even if you can't see them easily. By now you know what time it is, it's on to the weathering, and starting with AK Interactive Streaking Grime, this gets applied liberally all over the model to get that general all over filter going. The only area I avoided was the engines and exhaust because I have something different in mind for them later. After leaving it to dry for 15 minutes, I used clean white spirit, cotton buds and an old brush to remove most of the fluid, leaving it in the recesses and that grimy filter all over, but allowing the highlights to still come through. I find that with any weathering effect, it's down to personal taste and the story you want to tell. A friend of mine upon seeing my models said, "It must really suck to live in that world. Don't know the game, but the minis convey a really strongly depressing atmosphere," which is a lovely compliment and told me I was certainly on the right path for Trench Crusade. With the streaking grime fully dried, I went back over some of the chipping fluid areas of chipping, as well as some sponging of Surcoat Silver and Scale 75 Metal and Alchemy Speed Metal. Speed Metal is a brighter silver, so use that to create some fresher looking chips and build up some layering. I had left the engines and exhausts out of the streaking grime because I wanted to use AK Interactive engine oil to give them a different tone. Again using the reductive method as I wanted to sit in the recesses and to have a general sheen over the rest. I was quite happy I did that, as it did turn out fairly different while still fitting in. Next up was AK Interactive Rust Streaks. This I did not use the reductive method for, but more an oil dot filtering style. So putting a small amount onto the model in the desired areas, and using a brush and fresh white spirit to drag the fluid into streaks and pools where the rust would sit and rain would cause the rust to spread in specific patterns. The layering of effects builds up the models and for me brings them to life. They have a lot of flat areas as I've already said, and this just takes those areas a little interest and makes them pop. Green Stuff World Rust Textures, Light Oxide Rust, adds some colour and definition back in, but the grime brings it down, so again allows certain areas to pop and an area for those rust streaks to start. Villainy Inks Decrepit Filth was the final layer of filtering. It has particulates in it, so although thinned it was great for building up almost pin washes, but with texture so that in the areas it ran into it created a grainy look, which was something I wanted to try and I was really happy with how it came out. Finally, it was on to the basing, using the AK Diorama Splatter Effects dried mud to dry brush onto the feet and lower legs to start the process. I then used my trusty AK Diorama Effects Muddy Ground texture paste for the basing, same as the rest of the warband. With the texture paste still drying, I cut up some Green Stuff World barbed wire and pressed it into the paste using some additional over the top to help seal it in place. The barbed wire then got the Surcoat Silver treatment, which I then put on a coat of Vallejo Model Wash Black to dull it down. After painting the rims Citadel Abaddon Black, I used Dirty Down Gore on the barbed wire. Unlike the Citadel Technical Blood for the Blood God, this is more like the Yoo-Hoo painted trick as it cures solid and creates cool dripping gore effects. With that, they were complete. I tried out a lot of new effects and techniques on these guys, and I'm really happy with how they came out. A nice almost centerpiece to the warband where they stand out on their 40mm bases and their chunky armour, yet making them fit into the rest of the new Antioch warband. I hope you like them as much as I do, and as always thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to do all the usual things like comment, like, share, subscribe and follow, and I'll see you all in the trenches.